In a world of WWE, where muscle-bound characters, over-the-top theatrics, and soap opera-level drama reign supreme, Randy Orton stands out as a cold, dangerous, and unshakable icon. He doesn't need noise or grand speeches, just a piercing stare and a sudden spin to deliver his out-of-nowhere RKO and blow the roof off the arena. For more than 2 decades, Orton has been more than just a professional wrestler. He's a living chapter in the history of sports entertainment, a defining landmark that splits WWE eras into 2 parts, before Orton and after Orton. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe for more. Born in 1980 into a legendary wrestling family, Orton didn't step into the WWE as some nameless rookie. He carried with him a legacy and the weight of expectations. His father, Cowboy Bob Orton, was a major player during WWE's early days, even teaming up with Hulk Hogan at the very first WrestleMania. But instead of letting that towering legacy cast a shadow over his path, Orton chose to step out of it, literally. He quickly carved out his own name with a perfect blend of a chiseled physique, elite in-ring skills, and an instinctive flair for performance. WWE didn't take long to recognize his star power, and they were right. Orton became one of the youngest world champions in history, a tradition breaker, a monument toppler, and was forever branded with the nickname, the Legend Killer. But Randy Orton's journey was never easy. Throughout a career that has spanned over 20 years, he has seen countless ups and downs, from standing tall with a world championship belt to scandals backstage that nearly ended everything. He's been slammed for arrogance, penalized for breaking company rules, and even labeled a locker room troublemaker. But like a true predator, Orton always knew when to pull back, when to strike, and, more importantly, when to return and drown his rivals in a cold, merciless storm. What sets Randy Orton apart isn't just the impressive list of titles, 14-time WWE and World Heavyweight Champion. It's his ability to stay at the top of his game for decades. While many of his peers have either retired, chased Hollywood dreams, or faded into obscurity, Orton is still here. Alone, quiet, yet always a looming threat to anyone who dares to challenge him. The Viper character that WWE crafted for him. A cold, cunning killer who waits silently before delivering a single, lethal strike, mirrors who he is in real life. Reserved, calculating, and ruthlessly efficient. Family and childhood, the roots of a predator. Randy Orton didn't come out of nowhere in the world of professional wrestling. He was born into it. Wrestling wasn't just a job in his family. It was blood, destiny, and legacy. His father, Cowboy Bob Orton, was a standout star in the WWF during the 1980s, sharing the spotlight with legends like Hulk Hogan, Roddy Piper, and Jimmy Snuka. Even his grandfather, Bob Orton Sr., had made a name for himself in the 1950s, the golden era of sports entertainment. So before Randy could even walk, he was surrounded by the sounds of roaring crowds, the smack of bodies hitting the mat, bright arena lights, and that mythical haze of smoke rising from the ring. But being born into a famous wrestling dynasty didn't mean he had a peaceful childhood. Quite the opposite. Randy grew up largely without his father around, a man constantly on the road, caught up in the glitz, chaos, and temptations of the wrestling life. The young Randy quickly realized that those bright lights didn't shine on his family's everyday reality. There were days when his mother had to hold everything together while his dad toured from one city to the next. From her, Randy learned strength. But deep down, he carried a sense of loneliness and emotional confusion, a mix of resentment and longing that would later bleed into the characters he portrayed in the ring. Even as a kid, Randy showed signs of being a natural athlete. He was taller, faster, more agile, and had sharper reflexes than other kids his age. But instead of becoming a model student, Randy took a darker turn. He was constantly getting into fights at school, suspended for aggression, and had little patience for authority figures. Many blamed the absence of his father and the immense pressure of living up to a legendary family name. He became emotionally volatile, desperate to prove himself, not as someone's son, but as someone in his own right. At one point, his behavior nearly got him expelled. His mother, Elaine, once admitted that she never wanted Randy to follow in his father's footsteps. She had seen firsthand the injuries, the emotional distance, and the toll the industry took. She dreamed of a safer, more stable path for him, one without the spotlight's loneliness. But fate had other plans. Wrestling ran too deep in his veins. Every time he saw a match on TV, every time he heard his father's name cheered in an arena, his heart would race. And so, despite his mother's wishes, Randy Orton chose the path carved out by generations before him. The beginning of a wrestling career from Marine to WWE. Before the name Randy Orton became synonymous with fear in the WWE universe, few people know that his life nearly went in a completely different direction, one rooted in discipline and strict obedience, the United States Marine Corps. In 1998, at just 18 years old, Randy enlisted in the military, not out of deep patriotism, but more as a way to prove something to himself and find order in the chaos of his life. But it didn't take long to realize that his rebellious nature and defiant spirit clashed hard with the rigid demands of military life. Not long after joining, Orton found himself in serious trouble. He refused to follow orders, went AWOL, and eventually faced a military court-martial. He was sentenced to 38 days in a military prison, a stain on his record that would later be used as a part of his WWE persona, a defiant, complicated man with a troubled past. But for Orton personally, it was a turning point, not just a failure, but a moment of painful clarity. It was the first time he fully felt the collision between who he was and the world's expectations of him. Ironically, that breakdown would lead him straight into the one place that didn't suppress his rebelliousness, but celebrated it. After leaving the Marines, Randy decided to give wrestling a shot. Not just because of his family legacy, but because it felt like the only place he could truly be himself. With help from his father, he began training at the Ohio Valley Wrestling (OVW) Developmental Center, a breeding ground for future stars like John Cena, Brock Lesnar, Batista, and the Shelton Benjamin. It was there that Randy's natural talent became undeniable. He picked up wrestling techniques with ease, mastered the basics faster than most, and stood out especially for his ability to connect with the crowd, an in-ring charisma that's hard to teach. It didn't take long for WWE to notice. Soon, Orton was fast-tracked to the main roster. In 2002, he made his debut on SmackDown as a smiling, clean-cut, fan-friendly rookie, an image that couldn't be further from the Viper he would later become. But that wholesome babyface persona didn't last long. WWE leadership quickly realized that Randy's icy glare, razor-sharp features, and calm intensity were perfect for a villainous role. One where he didn't have to pretend, just reveal his true nature. He was quickly inserted into major storylines, from one-on-one rivalries to alliances with wrestling royalty. Backstage, people whispered that he was WWE's special project, a future icon being groomed from day one. With a clear vision and a long-term plan, Randy Orton rose through the ranks with shocking speed, landing a spot on Raw, WWE's flagship show, in less than a year. Evolution and the rise of the Legend Killer. If Randy Orton's debut was a slow-burning flame, then joining Evolution was the gasoline that ignited a wildfire, catapulting him from rising star to full-fledged WWE icon. In 2003, at just 23 years old, WWE made a bold move by placing Orton in a new faction called Evolution, alongside three veterans: Triple H, Ric Flair, and Batista. But Evolution wasn't just a stable, it was a statement. Ric Flair represented the glorious past, Triple H was the dominant present, and Orton, alongside Batista, was chosen to carry the future. Within the group, Randy was crafted into the image of a cocky, handsome, ultra-talented young gun, someone who had it all but still craved more. It was a character that was both easy to hate and impossible to ignore. WWE leaned into that arrogance and built an entirely new gimmick around him, the Legend Killer. Orton began attacking, mocking, and defeating some of the industry's biggest legends: Mick Foley, Shawn Michaels, Harley Race, Sergeant Slaughter, and even Jake the Snake Roberts. In one jaw-dropping moment, He interrupted the WWE Hall of Fame ceremony to insult and challenge the honorees live on stage. It wasn't just scripted drama. It was a brash declaration of a new generation led by Randy Orton, ready to overthrow the old guard and take the throne. The defining moment of this evolution came at SummerSlam 2004, when Orton defeated Chris Benoit to become the youngest world heavyweight champion in WWE history, just 24 years old. Holding the gold bell high under the arena lights, surrounded by deafening cheers, he wasn't just a kid with potential anymore. He was the new king. But the celebration was short-lived. On the very next episode of Raw, Evolution turned on him. As Orton stood celebrating in the ring with his teammates, Triple H gave the infamous thumbs-down signal. Batista lifted Orton high and slammed him to the mat as Ric Flair watched, cold and unbothered. That betrayal became one of WWE's most iconic moments. Power, politics, and the fall of a rising star in one chilling act. Suddenly, Orton wasn't Evolution's golden boy anymore. He became the exile, hunted by the very men who had built him up. But instead of collapsing, he rose, emerging as a lone warrior. And in doing so, he became even more captivating. His feud with Triple H wasn't just about revenge. It was a generational war. On one side, the established empire. On the other, a hungry, bloodthirsty challenger charging forward without permission. The Golden Era, championships, villainy, and the RKO phenomenon. After breaking away from Evolution, Randy Orton didn't flounder as many had expected. In fact, that's when he truly evolved into the ultimate predator, sharper, more dangerous, and more unpredictable than anyone in WWE at the time. From the mid-2000s through the late 2010s, Orton entered a golden era of dominance that lasted over a decade. Something only true legends can achieve in an industry as ruthless and cutthroat as professional wrestling. During this stretch, Orton wasn't just a champion. He was a looming threat, a ghost hovering around the title scene, and the nightmare every top babyface had to conquer to validate their place. WWE masterfully crafted his Viper persona, cold, methodical, and deadly. Unlike loud, muscle-flexing showboats, Orton moved slowly, struck quickly, and then watched his prey suffer. The tension he created simply by entering the arena, whether through a glance or a half-smile, was enough to glue fans to their screens. And at the center of it all was the move that became his trademark, the RKO. Unlike other flashy finishing moves that required setup and spectacle, the RKO came out of nowhere, like a snakebite, dropping opponents instantly. WWE turned it into a global phenomenon. Viral videos, memes, and a legendary RKO out of nowhere trend exploded across YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. Even people who had never watched a single match knew the name Randy Orton because of it. He became a social media sensation while still performing at an elite level, a rare feat few superstars ever accomplish. This period also saw legendary rivalries between Orton and names like John Cena, Triple H, The Undertaker, Edge, Shawn Michaels, and later on, Roman Reigns, Seth Rollins, and Daniel Bryan. In these feuds, Orton always played the classic villain, never needing to be liked, never justifying his actions, only focused on winning at any cost. In one infamous storyline, he crashed the on-screen wedding of Triple H and Stephanie McMahon and left Stephanie unconscious with a DDT. In another, he burned down Bray Wyatt's eerie wooden compound and knelt in the flames like a deranged disciple, a scene straight out of a horror movie. His matches weren't just fights. They were theatrical masterpieces, blending brutal combat with dark, psychological storytelling. As of now, Randy Orton has racked up 14 World Championship reigns, 2 Royal Rumble victories, a Money in the Bank briefcase, and has completed the Grand Slam, a rare feat for any WWE superstar. But more than titles or stats, what defines Orton is his consistency. In a business that demands reinvention for survival, Randy Orton has thrived by staying exactly who he is, a silent, calculating predator who never seeks the spotlight, but always lurks in its shadow. Scandals and backstage drama, from a short fuse to WWE's most protected star, Beneath Randy Orton's calm demeanor and cold-blooded presence lies a temperament that many once considered too dangerous to trust. Over his long career, Orton became known not just for his world titles or in-ring greatness, but also for a string of scandals, backstage conflicts, and erratic behavior that made him one of the most controversial and strangely untouchable figures in WWE. Time and time again, people questioned how someone with such a problematic past could not only survive, but thrive in a company as high-profile as WWE. Even early on, Orton was infamous for his hot-headedness and blatant disregard for rules. Stories from the locker room painted him as a guy who often crossed the line with so-called pranks, especially on new talent. Some of his antics included unlocking people's pants, farting into women's bags, or defacing others' belongings, then laughing it off like it was all part of the game. While some might have seen it as locker room hazing, others viewed it as toxic abuse, especially given his status as a rising star. One former WWE writer even accused Orton of sexual harassment, claiming he exposed himself and tried to intimidate her in a twisted power move. WWE never outright denied the incident, but issued a vague response, letting the story fade away without resolution. Despite online backlash, Orton continued to perform, seemingly shielded by his living legend status. It didn't stop there. Orton was suspended twice by WWE for violating their wellness policy, reportedly for using banned substances like steroids and painkillers. Though he never publicly admitted to it, leaked documents suggested a long-term dependency on performance enhancers. In most companies, this would have ended a career. But WWE, an organization built on edgy antiheroes like Orton, quietly handled it, benched him temporarily, then brought him back as if nothing had happened. One of the most infamous moments of his career came in 2010, during a live match with Kofi Kingston. After a botched move, Orton snapped mid-match, screaming "Stupid! Stupid!" at Kofi in front of millions watching at home. The clip went viral instantly, and rumors spread that Kofi was about to get buried in the company because of Orton's outburst. Although the two would later smooth things over publicly, the moment left fans wondering just how much backstage power Orton really had. Yet somehow, despite all of this, Randy Orton remained at the top. Why? Because he was simply too good, both in the ring and at generating controversy. WWE needed someone like him. Magnetic, unpredictable, and real. While other superstars tried to maintain polished, family-friendly personas, Orton leaned into being the villain, not just in character, but in his entire approach to the business. He didn't play the part of the bad guy. He was the bad guy, and that made him more compelling than almost anyone else. Wealth, home life, and the private world of the Viper. In the ring, Randy Orton is cold, ruthless, and almost emotionless, a relentless Viper who doesn't need approval, affection, or excuses. But beyond the spotlight, his real life tells a very different story. One that's private, peaceful, and in many ways, shockingly low-key compared to the violent persona he plays on screen. He's not flashy like The Rock, not a party animal like Ric Flair, and he certainly doesn't chase headlines like today's newer stars. Instead, Randy Orton lives his life mostly behind the scenes, quietly, but with undeniable dignity. As of 2025, Randy Orton's estimated net worth falls somewhere between $15 to $20 million. While not the highest in WWE, especially when compared to John Cena or Roman Reigns, it's solid, stable, and impressively well managed. His wealth comes mainly from his consistent WWE salary, pay-per-view bonuses, merchandise sales, licensing deals, and a few film appearances he made during time away from the ring. Though he never broke into Hollywood like The Rock or Batista, Orton still left his mark in mid-tier action flicks like 12 Rounds 2, Reloaded, and The Condemned 2, often playing roles that mirrored his real-life image, cold, quiet, and deadly. When it comes to real estate, Orton lives with his wife, Kim Marie Kessler, and their children in a modern mansion in Missouri. The home is sleek and minimalist in design, but packed with high-end features, including a private gym that Orton personally designed to stay in top shape and recover from injuries. There's also an outdoor pool, a wine cellar, and a full-on entertainment zone where he can unplug from the chaos of wrestling. According to neighbors, Randy is extremely reserved, never throws wild parties, and rarely steps out unless necessary. What makes him stand out even more is how uninterested he seems in the flashy lifestyle often associated with stardom. You won't catch him flaunting luxury cars, posing with six-figure watches, or checking in at high-end resorts. Off the clock, Orton prefers simplicity, fishing, working out, playing with his kids, and collecting vintage Jeep models. Close friends have shared that he's obsessed with off-road design, and even personally rebuilt a 1979 Jeep to take off-roading with his son. His home life, while rarely publicized, is reportedly full of quiet happiness. Orton married Kim in 2015 after meeting her at a fan meet and greet. She had 3 children from a previous relationship, and together they built a blended family grounded in love and mutual respect. On social media, Orton rarely posts, but when he does, it's usually something intimate. Holding hands with Kim, shirtless carrying his kids, or silently watching a sunset from the porch. No filters, no flash, just pure Viper style. This contrast between his cold-blooded ring persona and his humble off-screen lifestyle only adds to the mystery. Orton isn't trying to be a hero or a villain in real life. He's just being himself. A man who's been through pain, scandal, depression, and injury, only to choose a life of stillness and strength. Like the snake's skin he sheds, but never truly leaves behind. And in that stillness lies his real power. Because even though he may be the legend killer in the ring, Randy Orton outside the ropes is a man who's learned to live fully, quietly, and on his own terms.